Okay, so in this lesson we're going to go through and set up a IK system that will be able to drive these bind joints. So I'm going to start a little bit of organization here. I'm going to group the geometry, and let's call this Geo for geometry. Gonna group the joints, JNT for joints. And then I'm going to go group everything together here for our characters. There we go. So we have everything organized a little bit better. Here in the joints, I'm going to duplicate my shoulder joint. And this is going to end up being my my IK skeleton. And I want to be able to rename everything. So I'm going to go to modify with that selected and search and replace names. I'm going to search and replace for underscore bind underscore JNT, and I'm going to replace that with underscore IK, or let's do animation underscore IK underscore JNT. And I'm going to do that on the whole hierarchy, so that way it changes all its children's names. Apply, and we can see that it does that here. The only thing I'm going to do is take off that one at the beginning, and everything should be named the way we want it. Okay. So right now we would be tempted to do a really quick IK, but we will need to do a little bit of work to get this to work the way we want it to. So if we do skeleton, create IK handle tool, and we go from the beginning, oops, let's hide this skeleton there, so we're only looking at the animation. So let's do create IK handle tool, shoulder, and the elbow. We can see that doesn't quite work the way we would anticipate a normal chain for the elbow to work. So let's undo that. And what I'm going to do is take all my twist joints and unparent them. Actually, I'm going to need to unparent everything in here. So let's do that all in one swoop. Select everything, Shift P to unparent. Then I know that I want the wrist to be parented to the elbow, and the elbow to be parented to the shoulder. And now we can set up an IK system. So let's do that. So we're going to go to skeleton, create IK handle tool. Let's look at the option box for this, and it's set to single chain solver. I'm going to switch this to rotate plane solver, and then set up the IK handle, and this should work the way we expected it to. Great. Now the only problem is that those other joints are not following it the way we expected to. So we can start off by doing some parenting again. So we can set up this chain here We know that we want it to work this way. And let's parent these to their parents as well. So to either the shoulder or the elbow. Now let's see how this is working. This is a lot better. And we don't have any stretching yet. We might do that in a future lesson. So let's set this up to work the way we expected. So if we stretch this here by pulling that joint, we're not getting any of this following. So, and if we do this, it's not following either. So let's, and that's with, and if we select the IK, that works fine. But it's not truly doing exactly what we want yet. So let's try to get it doing that. What we're going to want to do is set up some point constraints to start off with. Constrain, and let's look at the option box. Maintain offset is fine. That's fine. Apply. That's going to bring it back into the center, which is not what we want. What we can do is do 0.25 and 0.75, which are the numbers we were using already, and that should get us part of the way there. Going to repeat that process here for this joint. Constraint point, and it's already working, but let's put it at 0.5 to make everything identical. 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to push G to repeat that previous action, and I'm going to make it 0.75 and 0.25. There we go. So if we do this here for the forearm, it's working the way we anticipate it. And let's say we had some stretching going on, that's working the way we expect it to. So that's great. And now we want to go in and set up rotations so that it works correctly. The only thing that we really want to attach to this is the rotate X. So what I'm going to do is select 1, 2, 3 and go to constraint, orient, option box, can turn maintain offset off, and I want to make sure that it's going along the X. Apply. So if I rotate this, it should affect the wrist, this joint as well. Let's look at that joint. If we go here, and we have two constraints here, the one we want to affect is the orient constraint, and we want it to be at 0.25, 0.75, so it's going to be more weighted towards the wrist rather than the elbow. Repeat that action there, and let's look at that selection here. Forearm orient constraint, we want them to be both at 0.5. Now, through this joint, pushing G to repeat the orient constraint. Forearm twist 1 is going to be 0.75 and 0.25. So everything should be working correctly here. Now let's just do that for these joints on the upper arm. So I'm going to select the shoulder, the elbow, this joint, and push G. So that's keeping it the orient constraint. Going to do 0.25 and 0.75. This is going to be at both 0.5. Repeat. And this one is going to be at 0.75 and 0.25. There we go. So we should have all the orients set up correctly. Now we just need to do the point constraints for the upper arm joints. So I'm going to select both of those. And do constraint point. And just adjust this point constraint to be at 0.25 and 0.75. And repeat that for the next joint. And let's look at the weights for that joint here. And that's going to be both of them at 0.5. Last joint. And on this joint, it's going to be at we need to do the constraint first, point constraint. Select that constraint, and it's going to be 0.75 and 0.25. There we go. So we select the IK, all works correctly. We select one of these joints, stretches correctly, cool, everything has a good weighting. And that should be it for setting up the IK. We'll look at doing some controls in a later lesson, but right now we have all the orientations and IK set up and all the constraints that we need here. Okay, so let's collapse this and do a little bit of organization. I just want this to make sure that we are in the joints. This IK, I'm going to group it, IKs, and the IKs are just going to go into the character group. And got everything organized here, and we have our IK control joint set up. In the next lesson, we'll look at doing the FK controls, and we'll see you in that lesson.